not training and developing people in a way to go about doing what we say we desire to do, then forget about it. It's not going to happen.
Welcome to the Workplace Theater Podcast, where we explore the joy, the pain, the comedy, and human connections that make up the world of work culture. In this episode, our guest Mark Chassman explores unlocking your potential and the complex balance between individualism and collectivism in the workplace. Our hosts, Chris, Michelle, Joe, and Julius, share their insights and experiences while offering practical advice on navigating workplace culture. So sit back, grab your popcorn, and let's dive into the fascinating world of workplace theater.
Welcome to the Workplace Theater Podcast, where today's topic is striking the balance, uniting individualism, collectivism, and transparency for a thriving workplace culture. Today's guest is Mr. Mark Chassman. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Julius. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Of course, we have our regular guests, Michelle, Joe, and Chris. How you guys doing today?
Doing great.
Good.
Happy to be here.
Okay,
I'm
awesome.
happy to be alive. You know, I got to say, I had a new outlook on life as we were driving this weekend. Not, a mile in front of me, there was a car that got hit on the highway and exploded. And unfortunately, 3 of the 4 people in the car did not make it. So I have just a new outlook on life. Everything is good because I'm here.
There we go.
Yeah. Wow. That's traumatic. Yeah. I often get in these conversations with friends about, not to make this the Workplace Theater morbid podcast, but I often think about like all the times that I potentially could have died, but I'm still here, you know, and it's just like, you know, yeah. So it's important to be present and enjoy every day because no day is promised. Now, with that, let's go to our headline for today. So, Mark, what we normally do is kick off. We normally kick off the podcast with a headline. Today got a little bit deep earlier, but that's the nature of podcasts. So, Michelle, why don't you kick off our headline? What do you have for us today?
Okay, we're taking a hard left from Joe's comment. Sometimes, as Julius mentioned, the headlines that I have somewhat relate to the topic we're talking about. Sometimes they're just completely unrelated. Today is one of those days. It's just sort of a lighthearted, strange little tidbit I came across. In some of the shows that are on TV now, where they're doing real estate, rehabs and sales in some of the luxury markets, all of a sudden people are noticing, especially in LA, something called toilet inflation. Okay, what this means is not larger toilets, but more toilets per bedroom, like more toilets per house. We're talking like high-end luxury market, right? So instead of having, 1 toilet per bedroom, 2 bed, 2 bath, 3 bed, 3 bath, it's double. It's about 1.5 to 2 toilets per bedroom. So some of the mansions are having 14 bedrooms and 27 bathrooms. Okay, 9 bedrooms, 16 bathrooms. Like, do we need this? You know, and I was doing a little bit of research. There's a steady increase in the number of bathrooms per house, you know, since like 64, when they first started doing some research on this. By 1974, they went from like 1 bathroom per house to like 2 bathrooms per house. 20% of the homes kind of had that. Moved up to like 50% of homes in 2013 had a couple of bathrooms. Now it's just completely gotten, I feel, out of control. And some of the thinking about it is that it's not really about like needing all these bathrooms, right? That it's about needing privacy, like, and I wonder if it's kind of like it's a way for people to get away from their families, you know, when they're in the home. And I just wanted to toss it out to the group, like, what the heck, you know? Why do we think that this is becoming a thing?
It just seems like a lot of extra shit to deal with to me.
Well, I feel like people with that many bathrooms probably don't have to clean them all themselves.
Well, I've got another one. I grew up in
But
LA,
it's
so I
like
can
shit.
say this. I grew up in LA, and I can say this. It says there's more people in LA that are full of shit than anywhere else in the rest of the United States. So they need
Okay.
I know if it was New York, they'd be like, yeah, we know.
Yeah,
Right.
Do I need an extra bathroom to do? I don't know. That's pretty interesting. I just can't wrap my head around it. I mean, is it because like it's easier to have that additional space than building another room, or what? I'm trying to rationalize this. I don't.
You know me. I'm always trying to give people the benefit of the doubt and rationalize what might seem kind of crazy. The only thing I can think of is you're hosting big parties. You have lots of people in your house, and everyone's complaining like, I love your parties, but it takes 30 minutes to get to the bathroom. Right? That's the only thing I could rationalize. Yeah, right? Yeah, this is, LA, these are, this is Hollywood. No one's going to go, no one wants to go to the wee-wee out in the back, right?
Right. But yeah, I mean, what does this say about us as a society, right? I mean, it's just so cuckoo. And I feel like because one of the theories was that it's not really about needing that many bathrooms, which you generously are coming up with that theory, Joe. And it might be true. But that it's about the desire for isolation, the desire for privacy. And I think that it seems to coincide with that increase in loneliness in our society as well. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, that's just my armchair analysis of this weird phenomenon.
Interesting. All right. Well, normally I'd say this is the perfect segue onto the next part of the podcast.
It's so not.
But today in this case it actually is not. But we're going to bounce to the the actual next part of the podcast. So, Mark, before we go to this next section, which is called the burning question, why don't you give us a little bit of history, a little bit of of your bio that kind of lets our listeners know kind of where you're going to be speaking from. And again, we started off with striking the balance between like uniting individualism, collectivism, and transparency for thriving workplace culture. So give us a little bit of your bio.
So based on the topic for today, I thought I'd just start out with a little transparency in terms of my background. I grew up in Los Angeles area. My dad was part of the entertainment business. I had a lens that was kind of very highly influenced by Hollywood, and very early on had a dream and aspiration to become a Hollywood talent agent, with the idea of representing people in the industry. And after I got out of college, I decided that I wanted to go into that profession, and ended up at the William Morris Agency, which is the largest talent agency in the world, thinking, okay, I had made it. I'm on my path. This is all I have to do is kind of keep going in this direction and ride this thing out. And in a very short period of time, I found myself sitting in the chairman's office, having taken a car out from work and crashed it over in front of the Universal Studios. And he sat me down in a chair, closed a door behind me, and immediately began to tell me that I was not William Morris or agent material. Might want to think about something else and what that might be. And from that moment on, I decided that what I was no longer pursuing was a career, but what I was pursuing was freedom. The idea of being able to control every aspect of my life and ultimately get ultimate freedom for myself. And so now it was a shift at the age of 27 to try and figure out, well, what the heck does that mean, and how do you go about actually getting that? And I say all that because as we start talking about this topic, I think that the truth is that when we talk about who we are individuals first. And our individuals, as individuals, we have attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors that are reflected of our experiences. And they are experiences that get programmed into who we are from the moment that we are birthed into this planet. And so as we think about where we want to go, and we think about the work environment and how we're going to show up for that work environment, the truth is that we are individuals. And the context of that then took place in terms of the rest of my life, as my life pursuit was how do I get to that place where I'm ultimately experiencing what I now call ultimate freedom? Ultimate freedom being freedom from fear, worry, freedom from doubt, freedom from finances, freedom from time, and then ultimately freedom from place and having that full experience. And so my career path took on that journey. And the career path of that journey was about how do I get ownership in something that will allow me to create financial freedom and ultimately allow me to have the kind of freedom that I'm now talking about. And that happened at 46. I had a 25-year career in the entertainment and broadcast and online media world with companies like ABC Television. Then I went to work early on with what was AOL, America Online, kind of the first connector of the internet. And then I went from there and I worked early on from Facebook. But my pursuit was very much about how do I get to that place. And so I started a lot of early on experiences because early on you be part of a team, bring the value that you can bring, and then actually get ownership position. And that was, to me, the path that would ultimately allow me to create ultimate freedom. That happened at 46, and I've been living my life since then. Most of what that life has really been about is coaching and mentoring and coming alongside people who have this similar aspiration. They might be in the work world, going down a path that they're not sensing is the path that they ultimately want to be on to achieve the things that they want to achieve in relationship to the dreams and aspirations that they have. And so I said, well, let me come along with you. I've been on this journey and see if I can help guide you. And in that, I facilitate one-on-one coaching and mastermind groups. I work with different organizations, trying to help them create the cultures and environments that we're talking about that are going to allow people who all come with their different attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors and aspirations. And then how do you create an environment where they can actually add value to the organization, also get what they want? So there's a little bit about me.
Awesome. That's amazing. All right, so we get to the very first part of our podcast, which is the burning question.
The burning question is, can a leader's moral compass shape the destiny of an organization, or is it merely a casualty in the pursuit of success?
Mark, what do you think?
Well, I think that first of all, again, a leader, the way again I think about a leader is all of us. We are all people of influence. So whether we think of ourselves as a leader or we have a title in an organization that then defines us in the world's construct as a leader, we are all people of influence, and we show up with our attitudes, beliefs, behaviors. So moral compass, right? How we behave is here's our moral compass, and we all show up with that. And I think that obviously when we have a moral compass that is not aligned with people in positional power, then you have dysfunction in organizations that then permeates itself, creates different dynamics, obviously relationally, but also economically, that play out. And so I think that the compass and how it ultimately gets aligned within an organization is critical to the fiduciary responsibility that that business has to, first and foremost, the people who are showing up to move the mission of that business forward, and then anybody who might be investing in that as an investor or a stakeholder in that organization. So that's an answer that is absolutely yes. Again, an interesting question. I would, again, love to hear what everybody else has to say and kind of get the conversation going. But I think it's a good question.
Definitely. Michelle, what comes to your mind? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I definitely think that the leader of the organization, their DNA from their moral compass is going to shape the environment of the company. So I think they're inextricably linked. What I'm thinking about is whether the employees of that company, whatever level, even people who are at the higher level, if they're not aligned with that leader's moral compass, because some leaders have, different moral compasses. I'm not saying they're better or worse, but they're not aligned with yours. And so if your goal might be, say, financial independence, as you talked about naming that goal for yourself, Mark, early on in your life, and you found a way to actually achieve that goal through this organization that was run by someone whose moral compass was not aligned with yours, is that something that is I'll say worth doing, possible to do. For me, I'm very, I'm highly impacted by this kind of stuff. There's no way I could. I would have to find a leader that was, very aligned with my moral compass, because it's the kind of thing that just is a record scratch for me on a daily basis. And so, but I think that there are plenty of folks who that's not as big of a deal for them. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I was going to say, Joe, does it matter what position you're trying to take in an organization as to who thinks about this or who doesn't think about this?
I think it all depends on your intentionality, right? So if your goal is to grow in an organization and what you care about is your next position, and it means somebody might have to fail for you to succeed, but that's part of your goal. Your moral compass might say that's okay, right? My intentionality is to reach this point and things like that. So I think it's a personal thing based on what your morals are. So I do agree with Michelle. I've been in many different organizations where I'm not aligned with the leader from a moral perspective, but we can get aligned on other things such as goals and intentions and what we're out to do, our mission, things like that. So there's other things to align yourself around that could work, but your moral compass definitely makes a big difference. And when it comes down to when things get tough, I think that's what really tells you if you're gonna appreciate what's going on or you're not going to appreciate what's going on, right? You can be in a highly compassionate environment that's really, the last thing they want to do is layoffs, but then they'll say, well, everybody needs to take a 10% pay cut so that we don't have to lay anybody off. And if your goal is to, go out and make more money, does that work for you, right? Even though, from a moral perspective, we're keeping everybody employed, it's giving you the warm and fuzzies, but then from your pocketbook, it doesn't align. So I don't know it's necessarily something you lose. I think it's something you come in with. And then as with everything else, there's certain levels where you either compromise, you either change your mindset, you compromise, or you jump off. You're like, I'm not going to take this. So that's how I would respond to that question.
Okay, so Chris,
I want to clarify something too. When I'm thinking about the moral compass of the leader, and how I was saying that's sort of like the fabric of the company, I'm thinking about just how the company is doing business. So, for example, I was just reading an article about one of those companies that buys homes. It's I won't name the company because I don't want to get in trouble, but it's one of those places that buys a home that's maybe in disrepair as is, makes it easy for the person to get out of the house and, move on to the rest of their lives. The concept of it is sound. The rules of the company are sound and look like they're going to protect the customer, but the actual practices of the folks in the company are coming under question, where they're taking advantage of the elderly and not giving them the time to rethink the sale, a lot of pressure. That's what I'm talking about. Not necessarily the altruistic type of things like, is this guy, allowing us time to volunteer? That would be great too. But I'm thinking about more just how is this, what is the mission of this business and what is it doing to make money? That's the part where I just want to clarify. That's where I've got my record scratch, where I really need to be aligned with what that company's doing.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Chris. I think it was your turn.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say, so I can give an example, right, inside of that, Michelle. So I worked for a company where the CEO was brilliant, absolute, genius, MBA from a very prestigious East Coast university, amazing guy. But he was okay with having an 80% effectiveness score when it came to our customers. And I'm like, we need to strive for like 95th percentile, but not every environment works that way, right? We were in an environment where providing the most excellent customer service would have bankrupted the company. And so, it even though from a moral perspective, I wanted us to do better with each and every, he was looking at it like, if we do, we're done. So you can either get on board with that, or you can go elsewhere that has additional resources and charges their customers more, and then you could do that. You can succeed there.
Well, the incentives for capitalism are clear there, right? So that's a calculation that he made, and that's a legit decision that he made based on the system we're in. So.
Well, that not-for-profit business would have been out of business if they provided their customers with anything more, because this, the entity that funded that company was trying to come up with less and not more. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we can call it capitalism, but it was actually more socialistic, like a socialist program cut than capitalism. He just was capitalistic. The funding of
not-for-profits is a whole other kettle of fish that's also driven by capitalism. But anyway, it's Chris's turn.
Yeah, speaking of that, well, that's a perfect segue. Chris, you're CEO of a nonprofit. So when you think about the burning question, what comes to your mind?
I think it's absolutely essential. Your moral compass is your culture guide, right? It's like how your organization is going to move. I do understand, though, to Joe's point, like, I would love to have 100%, right, guaranteed rate of every young adult that comes through our program to come out and earn money. We don't have the funding to give all of the support, right, that I really feel we need right now. That isn't going to change, though, my vision of what I want it to be, right? We're going to continue to strive towards that vision and towards that goal, knowing, hey, we may fall short this year, but here's where we need to pick ourselves up to get on track and on pace to do that. So I think in a dream world, we always want to be where the vision is, but sometimes we have to see the vision and work towards it. And I think that's the moral compass, is knowing what is that vision, are we all aligned with it, and then are we all moving in one accord to get towards that vision.
Yeah. So I'm still curious, though. Do you, and I'll go back to you, Mark, does it matter, the way people think about this, like the position? If you're taking like a lower level position, maybe they're not really thinking about, the moral compass of leadership. But maybe they are, the higher position. Do you think that has to do with it at all? Anything to do with it at all? I was
simply, when Chris was speaking, I think that the founder, let's take the leader as somebody who's created the enterprise that is now trying to serve a defined mission. I primarily think that if there's only one job of that founder leader, their job is to continue to engage the imagination of the people who come to work there. And so if you're there engaging the imagination of the people that come to work there, again, whether your business construct is a nonprofit or a for-profit, then that is true north on your moral compass. So I'll give an example. At Facebook, when I went to join Mark Zuckerberg in his endeavor, I was employee 43. The imagination for him that he brought forward to anybody who come to work there is, our primary and only objective is to help people share the things they care about with the people they care about. We are building a business that will only be a business if people value how we go about helping people share the things they care about with the people they care about. And that got repeated over and over and over and over and over again. Now, this is where the market cap of this company was zero at the time that I had joined. So who showed up for that? People who felt that's going in a direction that I want to be a part of. It's going north for me. Why? Because I believe that that's a value proposition that I would like to have in my life. And in that construct, I believe others would like to as well. And then again, my dream, right? Boy, if we could do this well, there could be an opportunity because ownership was part of the construct of coming to work there as employee 43 of, right, creating freedom in the way that I desired it. So the moral compass to me was everything. Now, similar, Steve Case was the same person for AOL, and his whole, right? Imagine this, that the world is completely connected. We connect the entire world together through a medium where everybody is now their own broadcast television station. That was the vision. It came as a media-oriented kind of a construct where the people who controlled the fourth estate, which were television and newspaper, were billionaires. And if you had a voice and you wanted to communicate and engage with people, you'd have to connect with them. Well, connectivity didn't exist then. So he created AOL using dial-up technology to connect people. So in a similar way, there was his compass. What happened in the AOL experience is, as technology started to expand, his focus was so much on the how, let's connect people through dial-up, that we lost our way because broadband came along and we invested in content thinking that's the way to monetize the business, and the true north on that company got lost. And there's a whole story behind how it got lost. We ended up buying a Time Warner, we ended up putting our resources into developing content, and we lost that connectivity thing. The interesting part of it was that Facebook did what AOL intended to do as its moral compass leader, different language that Mark brought versus Steve Case brought, but it was all about connectivity and allowing people to, right, share with one another. One lost its way, one found its way. Whatever the outside world says about it, to me, especially as a participant in it, and then therefore a stakeholder or an investor in both those companies, here's where it lost its way. Steve Case lost its way. Mark Zuckerberg kept its way. That was the compass. Now, we can call that moral, or we can call that capturing the imagination of the people and then behaving in a way that aligns with that imagination. And to me, that's what it is. That you have to behave consistently with what you're selling as what you could imagine as what your business can accomplish in order to then, for people to show up. Whether you're a low-level person, it doesn't really matter. It's like, are you aligned with where we're going and what we're doing? Because in a culture that is aligned, you won't last long if you don't have, right, the same compass going in the same direction. Now, once there's dysfunction and you don't know where it's going, because now you allow the hierarchy to take over and your true north is no longer true north, then therein lies, right, what I would consider is the downfall of any business or any organization. So I don't know if that helps, but that's
a great distinction. No, yeah. That was a great distinction. Go ahead,
Mark.
Joe.
Can you tell us, Mark, as employee number 43 at Facebook, what your job was?
My job was I was a vice president of advertising sales in the Midwest, and we had no advertising to sell.
And
we were that early on where we know we're going to one day want to sell advertising, but where we were at that time is we were opening up access to college campuses to use the platform, and we were just in the early phases of development, learning from our users at the time what was allowing us to actually do what we were doing, get in the way of what we were talking about was our true north. Share the things you care about with the people you care about. That was kind of the overriding. So can we make that happen for people in a way that they value it enough for us then to, right, get them to want to continue to show up here and engage, and then time spent and amount of time there turns into an opportunity to create an advertising platform. But when I was there, we had not got to that point yet. But they wanted strategic input, because that's what I did at AOL. Early on, I was there before we were monetizing advertising. They said, we want you to bring your strategic thinking on how we ultimately build the bridge to monetization of this business.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking about this burning question, Mark, and who you are, because I have the privilege of knowing Mark now for at least a good 5 years, if not a little longer. And I know Mark to be somebody who is like aside from strategic and visionary, just this amazing challenger, right? Somebody that pushes the limits, a maximizer, someone with intentionality, right? So you're this great challenging maximizer, sales leader, push the envelope, right? How would you describe yourself in that kind of light, Mark? What's your tell everybody what your Gallup 5
Well, someone
top
called
five
me an
strengths
asshole,
are.
I think. Maybe they would call me that.
Okay.
Well, I think back to transparency. I'm an older guy now, and I look back on who I am in my life, and I've never been more comfortable in my skin than I am at this moment in time, because now I've evolved and gotten to a place. But I would say that when I look at, who I've tried to be is true to myself, and that true to myself is that transparent part of the equation. I think that what is lacking in our organizational structures today is that kind of transparency, especially from people in positions of leadership. Businesses are creations, and creating a business is a journey. And there are going to be a lot of ups, and there are going to be a lot of downs. And so what we're going to do here, if you show up and work for us, is we're going to help you grow so that you can navigate your way through these things and go be more valuable out in the world somewhere else. And when we start to really care about people in the light of who they are and their dreams, then we're going to do a better job of not only keeping people in our organizations, good people in our organizations, but helping them become pillars in the industry that we're in. And so if we are pillars in an industry because we've developed in a culture that actually cared about us as individuals, not only do we as that company get the benefit, but the entire industry gets the benefit. And I say all that because I have experienced through my Facebook experience, what we're talking about here is that a lot of the people who got in early on that are become industry pillars and are in other organizations that they have either created or they are investing in. And they understand the things that I'm talking about of how dogmatic this 22-and-a-half-year-old kid who's looked out from the outside world as, some mad scientist, was it focusing on what is the thing that we do better than anybody else. And by the way, when I started with Facebook, MySpace existed. There are other social media platforms that no longer exist today that were there, including AOL that is no longer in existence today. And yet this one has evolved and survived and gone through transitions and still morphing into what, a better future. And some people are on it, some people are off of it, but the same concept was aligned with what that founder represented. And so therein lies the opportunity again to attract the best talent. And so in all transparency, back to leaders, if you're not helping them learn how to be truly transparent with their people, then they're going to be suboptimal, I would call them leaders. Because now you have a world where you have an economy where my 27-year-old daughter, my 25-year-old, 21-year-old daughter can make a business out of their passion and their dream and have it suit the lifestyle that they want to create for themselves, so they don't have to go work for some dysfunctional organization that doesn't know how to treat people in the modern day in a manner by which they will be valued and bring value to their organization. If you don't start out with caring about that individual and their dreams and their aspirations, then you're going to be suboptimal in getting the best talent that's available. And truly the best talent not only wins, but continues to grow and continues to actually have impact. And so I get the benefit as an investor now in my world of getting a lot of people with a lot of great ideas. And I'm looking for that, transparency. Like, is this person real? And you can tell by the questions they ask, and their questions specifically about their experiences, their background, and what they've done, and how they've made other people money, and how they made themselves money prior to becoming, the now new idea person for their venture. And a lot of them are not being transparent. A lot of them are not being real. They say, I understand you have an idea and an aspiration, but are you willing to be transparent enough with your people and with others who can come alongside you and help you be the best version of yourself so you can lead this organization to the vision that you have for it?
Yeah. No, that's awesome. No, that's great. So now let's kind of shift over to the next part of our podcast, which is called The Situation.
All right, so now imagine you're a manager leading a dynamic team in a growing design agency, right? So you're a manager leading a dynamic team in a growing design agency. Your team comprises of experienced designers with distinct creative styles and young, ambitious talents who bring innovative ideas. However, you notice a struggle to strike the right balance between individualism and collective collaboration. Some team members fiercely guard their design approaches, causing friction and hindering the exchange of ideas. On the other hand, there's a need to foster a sense of collective identity and shared purpose to tackle complex projects, right? So one group of people been around for a while, they have a style, and then a newer bunch that are bringing their innovative ideas, right? And they're kind of butting heads. So now here's the question of the situation. How do you navigate this delicate balance, encouraging individual creativity while fostering a cohesive team culture that thrives on collaboration and mutual respect? And Mark, that was a lot to be said, but how would you foster that relationship of people that have been around, all creative people, but people have been around for a little while doing things the way that they've been doing them, and a bunch of new folks coming in, new blood, with their new ideas and wanting to innovate. And you see that they're not really working well together. How might you help them to work better together?
Well, I'll start with, this word we use a lot of times is creating a culture. And so a culture to me is shared attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors about something specific that you're defining and then going through a process of developing that. So if you want to create a culture of collaboration, this kind of sounds like the core principle here, then for anybody that comes in, you have to first believe they have the right attitude, and that's why you've hired them. And then when it comes to determining whether or not they actually do, is you got to take them through a process to see if their beliefs and their behaviors align with their attitude. And so there has to be a training process where you say, okay, we're going to take you through a training process if you come on board. And that training process is designed to help you learn how we collaborate within this organization. We use these words, we say, well, collaboration in one environment, organization, might look completely different than collaboration in another environment. So when I was in Hollywood, one of my experiences in my 5-year journey there was working as a talent coordinator for the production of a television show. And the television program had to be turned out once a week. So writers, directors, and talent would get in a room together and collaborate. And there's a process in the creative entertainment world by which collaboration actually is constructed and takes place. Why? So those people can go from that project to the next project and they could collaborate. And so there's an industry that collaborates really well, because if it didn't, you couldn't get, the product that has to be delivered every week, to happen. Now there's other industries that could learn from how they did that, but I've learned from my experience in the efforts to try and collaborate that, again, unless true north is being set by founders and leaders who say we have a culture of this, and the attitude, belief, and behavior we have toward collaboration is this, and we take you through a training process so that you can align with it, then it doesn't happen. And in my experience, outside of Hollywood, more often than not, in my 25 years of being kind of in the broadcast, online media world, and then working with other startup businesses, it doesn't happen. Because the leader themselves hasn't been in an environment where collaboration worked well for them, and said, let me take the principles and practices of what that looks like, because I've experienced it firsthand, and apply it to my organization. So my ultimate is that unless you're actually training and developing people to do whatever the culture is desiring to do, then by default, it just falls apart. They might call it collaboration. Yes, we are collaborating. But when you look at the output, the product, you're saying, so is that the best we can do in the way that we go about collaborating here? And I would tell you that the environments that I was in Hollywood, they were filled with things that you were thinking, you're hearing people talk, and you're hearing people throw ideas against the wall. And if you're a logical person, you would say 99% of what they were saying didn't make sense. But logical people don't do well in the creative environments. People who kind of think black and white don't do well in those environments, because one idea sparking another idea might a day later have tripped the idea that is ultimately going to be the foundation for that show for that week working. And if we're all judging everything somebody says at every moment in time, it's going to fall apart. So anyway, that was my experience. The show that I worked on was called FTV. It was old. It was a comedy takeoff of MTV, the origination of what MTV was. And we had comedic writers and actors, and we had musicians, and we had, literally like an eclectic kind of group of people who were collaborating each week to put on a television show. And it was the most amazing experience that I had in my upping of seeing collaboration at work and how it worked well. So, bottom line is, if you're not training and developing your people to do that thing within your culture, it ain't going to happen.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah, Joe, we're going to
Mark, can you? You were one of the early people to adopt kind of strength-based leadership, right? Mm-hmm. Can you speak to that a little bit on how that kind of fits into, because there's that individualism component, right? So as we're training and developing everybody in a certain culture, and there are things that we want to do working together, how then would you take their skill sets, what makes them best, and kind of fit that inside of the collective?
Yeah, well, I am back to this, right? We started out with this idea of collective, and then kind of the organizational constructs where people are supposed to work well together. And you heard my premise is that we are individuals. We start out as individuals, and we are unique in that. And in our uniqueness, our attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors, our own cultures that are a derivative of our experiences, and then who we are. And in that who we are, we each have things that we naturally bend to in terms of our gifts and our strengths. So I adopted back in the 90s, when I started building organizations and building sales organizations, Gallup Strength Finders assessments as a way to understand people a little bit better about what they naturally show up and do well. And I found it to be really valuable. And the first part I found to be valuable, because I've been doing it since the early 90s, is I've never seen an individual who shares the same top 5 theme strengths as another individual, which reinforced to me that we're all individuals. And therefore, as a result, we need to understand ourselves in light of who we are, and we need to understand one another in light of who they are. And so this created a foundation or a framework for being able to do that better. Not perfect, because it's an assessment and we're all unique. So therefore, it's layers. It's not just one thing that you say, okay, this is who Julius is, and this is who Michelle is, and this is who Chris is, this is who Joe is, by looking at a Strength Finders assessment. But it is an input that helps us better understand ourselves and one another. And the most important part is understanding ourselves. Like, be able to say, hey, yeah, this is how I tend to show up. So as Joe said, I tend to show up as an 8, which is an Enneagram challenger, and I tend to show up maximizing things, which is my Strength Finder kind of number one, strength, which is trying to take the things that are good and like, okay, yeah, that's good, but this is how we can help make it great. And it's like fine tuning and tweaking things, here and there. And I just naturally kind of show up and do that. And so for somebody who doesn't understand what that means or understand me, they go back to the point, who is that asshole, right? Like, why does he keep doing that? And the answer, he keeps doing that because that's how he's designed. Well, each one of us are designed in a way that affirms why you keep doing things. And if you could understand it, and then others could understand it, there's a greater appreciation for one another, then we could work better together. But back to the point, right? If we're not training and developing people in a way to go about doing what we say we desire to do, then forget about it. It's not going to happen. And so we have a lot of word speak in the corporate world, in the business world, where words mean nothing, as opposed to, let's define this thing that we're saying we are. We are a collaborative culture, and then let's help you develop your talents and gifts that are uniquely yours to work successfully, harmoniously within a collaborative culture. And now we have a process to do that. We don't break that down. We just throw words out. It's just like a lot of mumbo jumbo. So I don't know, Joe, if I answered your question, but there you go.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mark. That was exactly where I was. I knew you would go, because I've heard this before, and I think it's super valuable that other people hear that as well. And we do have websites that generate those corporate speaks, I haven't looked at them in a while, but they're fun.
So Chris,
this is a story again, quick story, as a way to affirm, right, the kind of leader that we need today. So a friend of mine is starting a soccer club in Sarasota, Florida, which is where I have another place where I live during the winter time, and he's from Sweden. And he's a founder of this soccer club that he has aspirations of creating several of these and living in the United States and being very successful at it. And his background is in coaching, and he's got all the technology and the technique, and he's a very smart guy. And I said, have you ever done a Strength Finder assessment to understand yourself better in light of who you are? He goes, no, I've never done that. And so he did it. And actually, before he did it, he on the day that his club was supposed to launch, his head coach quit. He said, I'm out of here. I don't want to be. And so then I came in, I said, well, have you ever done a Strength? And he did. So he did his assessment. We sat down. And I asked him, I said, so what did it enlighten for you? And he said, well, it enlightened a truth that I wasn't willing to buy into about who I am. And now I'm sitting in a place going, now what do I do with this? And the truth was he had his strengths, there's 4 categories of strengths. One of them is kind of how we tend to think or solve problems. The other one is how we build relationships. The other one is around how we execute. And the other one is how we influence. It's like these 4 categories. Well, 4 of his strengths were in the how you solve problems and how he thinks. And one of them was on the execution side. He had no relationship building strengths. In fact, his highest one of the 32 themes was like 28. And he said, wow, I never thought I'm not very good at relationships. And he said, but come to think of it, I'm not very good at relationships. And I said, okay. Now, you can beat yourself up over that and saying, hey, I'm not. Or what you can do is think about people who are part of what you're trying to do, who could be and could help show up for you in that regard. So I said, here's a relationship strength that I have. It's called relator. I like to go very deep with people and really get to understand the heart and soul of who people are. And that's what I do really, really well. I said, now, if I were on your team and we were dealing with the head coach that you decided, I would be an asset to you. But you'd have to know that about what you just learned about yourself and be willing to invite me in to play a role that you can't play very well because it's not your design. It's not that you're not good enough. It's not that you're a bad relationship person. It's just that it's not as much your design relative to mine. I said, so I could have add value and been an asset to your team. This is building teams around understanding the dynamics of what you need to do for your organization to be successful, and then understanding how to recruit and develop talent to play the roles that are important to play within a successful organization. And I say all that because it's easy, but it's hard. And it's hard is if you don't have a process by which you go about doing things, then you need to get one. And if you don't have one, then you're just faking it. You're just, I call it spinning plates, pretending to be a CEO or whatever it is that you're trying to be. And a lot of pretenders out there in the world. And some of these pretenders actually get money and start companies and call themselves CEO. Anyway, there you go. But that helped him, and now I put it together. And we got the next coach in, and now I get to work with, right? And now I get to play a role in that regard to make sure that we get to know that person deeply and in a way that he feels cared for. And yes, I could bring my friend along with me in that regard, but I could take the lead in relationship to that person.
That's awesome. So, with some of the things that you just said, Mark, just kind of going back a little bit. So, Chris, I guess I would say, do you think that, many organizations are focused more on kind of this kind of collective, how they want everyone to be without really paying attention to the individual sides of folks?
I don't want to say most organizations. I think it depends on the leader and what organization they're trying to create. I think the goal is to build a culture that encompasses everyone. But the goal is also to bring out everyone's individuality so they can come to work and be their best self. And so, I just think it's a balance between those two things. I think there are organizations out there, both nonprofit and for-profit, that are doing a good job at it. Some are doing great jobs at it. I think the bigger your organization gets, to Mark's point, if you don't have processes to deal with that growth, then you lose relationship in there. And the relationships are the foundation of what's going to keep the vision alive. So as you do grow, those processes need to be set so that there is a process for dealing with interaction, for dealing with conflict, for dealing with it going left when it should have gone right. And yeah, it's just it's a learning lesson for us. I know as an organization, we're striving to find that balance every day, especially being called Your Passion First, because it's about an individual doing their passion, but that passion is only valuable in so much as it offers value to that next person or to that group of people. So, again, just finding that balance is so crucial.
Cool. Michelle?
I'm thinking about something that Mark said early on about the situation, right? So creating something that is bringing everybody along, a training program, making sure everybody kind of understands the vision so that everyone can get on board with that. And I'm reflecting on experience that I've had multiple times over where that kind of training has been provided to folks, and they still sort of revert into the previous culture that they're used to working in. And the challenge is because we're talking about humans who don't really get with the program sometimes. you're laying out everything that should work, but then they sort of revert back into whether it's a comfort zone or something that they feel will work better than what you're putting forward. And I just wonder, Mark, if you've had that kind of experience and how you tackle that, changing the culture in ways that are, multi-layered maybe.
Yeah, well, first talk about the answer is yes, and I'll tell that story, and then just kind of back to definitions, right? Again, this is my belief. I believe that we don't change anybody, that people decide they want to change, and then the path that we're pointing them to, they see the benefit for themselves in going down that path. And so the truth is not everybody, quote unquote, wants to change. They have experienced something in other cultures and experience. They said those are the ones that suit me, and maybe they're not a fit. So I took over in my early 30s a group of television stations in Alaska, ABC affiliated television stations in Anchorage, Fairbanks, and Juneau as an operator to turn around these bankrupt television stations. They're in receivership, so the FCC took them over because the prior operators basically bankrupted the business. And I took them over. And I knew that, this was going to be an interesting job. Here's a kid from Southern California coming into Alaska and culture, people with attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors that are very much oriented to the realities of lifestyle up there. And I had to turn this business around. And so, point being that I had to change what was the norms for the way that those people were running or operating that business to new norms. And back to the reality was that 80% of those people within 2 years had to go away. It wasn't because I wanted them to go away. It was because they decided that they didn't want to change their operating system, or in other words, their paradigms, the way they go about doing what they do, to align with the direction that we were trying to go. And I couldn't change them, so they had to decide to change their job. And those were the conversations. It's time for you to decide what it is you want to change your job to, and who do you want to change it with, because it's not going to be here. So this was the realities, and then we turned it around in 4 years in terms of, went from zero in cash flow to, a number that allowed us to then sell those television stations to a new owner. And so it's, the reality. But understanding humans, understanding ourselves first. When we understand ourselves that way, it makes sense, but we have to show up and teach people about themselves, and then teach people how to make decisions that are for their best interest. Because sometimes the truth is that there isn't an alignment. There's not an alignment where I'm imagining this organization is going to go, what I need you to do in terms of your attitude and how you need to show up and behave in order for this to work. And I guess the realities of that is within organizational structures, there's people who get to make those decisions. But my encouragement is that, hey, the decisions are now you get to go pursue, something that's more aligned with who you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Perfect. All right. Nice. Let's get into the last segment of the podcast, which is Workplace Story.
Oh, I love this story. So it's one of my favorite companies because I have a 9-year-old son. In the early 2000s, Lego, that brick company, right, was a struggling toy company, was on the brink, not the brick, the brink of bankruptcy. Determined to turn the tide, Lego embarked on a remarkable transformational journey. Externally, they engaged with their passionate fan community, inviting them to actively participate in the company's revival. Lego embraced customer collaboration, transparency, and open communication. Fans were encouraged to share their ideas, designs, and feedback, which helped shape new products and rekindle customer interest. Simultaneously, Lego fostered a culture of innovation and collaboration among its teams. They encouraged open dialogue, cross-functional cooperation, and empowered employees to think creatively. This internal culture shift allowed Lego to tap into the collective brilliance of their talented workforce. As a result, Lego not only regained its position as a beloved brand, but also achieved record-breaking sales and became a global leader in the toy industry. And so as I read this story, I ask what your thoughts are, and do you know of any others that kind of, that you can share of just this remarkable transformation?
Lego really realizing we're out of business unless we reimagine our business. And instead of a founder saying, I've reimagined it and here's what it's going to be, said, how about we reimagine it with a potential, right, customers, future customers, who we're going to open up a process, a way for them to bring their ideas into the imagination of our corporation. And let's see if we could reinvent this company and turn it into something that it's not now, but it could be, and see if it will survive. And I mean, the kudos of that is, again, don't know who the leader, kind of the CEO was, and whether or not the one who was, when it was going in the wrong direction, had to, right, be moved on, and so that you can bring in somebody who their moral compass was oriented toward collaborating with customers to do this. But the answer, my yes was that was the Facebook experience. The reason I said is I had no advertising to sell when I got there is because we were collaborating with college students. We were opening up the platform to engage with what we were trying to give them, which is connectivity tools, and they were giving us feedback as to how to make it better or what worked and what didn't work. And so that was how the business got built. When I was there, I was 43 years old. I did not have a college.edu email address, which was what you needed in order to get access to the platform. In fact, it wasn't just a college.edu email address. You had to be a specific college campus that was now being opened up to before we opened it up to all college students. And so that was the process of actually engaging the potential future customers of the platform to get their ideas and their inputs and their thought. And it was real time. And so the majority of people who worked there were actually engineers and computer programmers who would be engaging with customers on fine-tuning the platform and the engagement process that was actually taking place. But that's what we're talking about here is a leadership thing. A bend toward creating collaborative cultures is a leader who understands how to invite other people in and embrace their ideas and test out their ideas to see if they have merit or they have value. Not that we didn't do that at AOL. We did not do that at AOL. Instead, we said we can become more valuable instead of collaborating with our customers by buying a media company that basically was an albatross and ended up putting a thing around our neck and basically strangling us. So,
yeah, it's interesting you say that. We just had a conversation about kind of the decisions or the choices that Sears was making versus Amazon, right? And
yes.
Sears kind of probably took the same perspective as AOL did, right? And just lost everything instead of engaging kind of their internal staffs and their customers or whatnot, right? Even though they had the blueprint with their catalog book the entire time, like right there in front of them. So it's pretty interesting. Michelle, what are your thoughts on the story?
Yeah, I mean, I just love the kind of collectivism that's inherent in the story. So that harnessing the greater power within your own company. So it talked about harnessing the creativity of their own employees, but also their customers, who are their biggest fans and who are the source of their success. It's just my favorite kind of story, because I really do feel that though leaders obviously set the tone, are so important for moving things forward, another part that a leader really needs to play is understanding how to harness that humanity for the betterment of not just the bottom line, but for everybody who's touching that business. So these employees, I'm sure, were having a blast being able to follow their ideas about where to go next. The customers feel engaged. They're having fun. You now see Lego museums and Lego movies and everything else, and it just has kind of become something that's known as like a joyful brand, and I feel like that's why, because it's harnessing that creativity and power of people.
Awesome. Chris, so last words before we exit out of this podcast. Last words on today's conversation.
We're all individuals, but we're all part of a bigger whole, and the only way that we can all be in healthy states of mind is if I think we're finding that balance between the two, between the individuality of who you are and what you bring to the world, but then also the collective nature of whether it be your family mission, your job and their mission and their culture, but finding alignment between those two is what's going to allow us to live in this place of happiness. So thank you, Mark. Appreciate all your words of wisdom.
Joe?
If you want collaboration, you've got to invite people in, right? And I love, what Mark has said, and it's things that I've taken to heart. And as we've been building what we're building, it's people. I don't think people really know themselves all that well, and when we get to know ourselves better, we know what makes us great, and it's a lot easier to contribute when you're focused on the things that make you great, rather than trying to cover up all your faults and your flaws and hide things that you don't want people to see. And then the beauty is when we know what the strengths of other people are, and we know where we don't have strengths, right? As Mark was sharing with his the story of the founder of the soccer club, right? We can bring other people alongside of us and really create a ton of value, right? So that's let's remember to invite other people in, but not lose sight of why it's important to run metrics and run things. It's not to filter people out. It might filter people out based on the situation, but it really does so much more good when we have an idea of who we each are and what we do best, because that does help elevate the conversation, and it is a lot easier to become more collaborative when you're not trying to have somebody be somebody that they're not. So Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
Michelle?
Yeah, Mark, great hearing more about your experience. I think you are one of our guests with the most varied background, and you've done so many different things in different areas, so that was fascinating to hear about. Thank you for sharing. I also love strengths-based management, strength-based sort of self-development, and I was reminded of my Strength Finder profile too, so I'm kind of pondering that now based on our conversation. One thing that I remember as I've done these different personality tests is every time it says the same thing. The varied ones that I've taken all land on the same thing, to the point where I'm finally believing it. You take the first one, you're like, I don't really know, there's all these other things, and you take the next one and the next, and you're like, all right, I guess that's me. So thanks for reminding me of that. And just great talking to you. Thank you for spending time with us.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so for me, and Mark, we didn't really share this, the kind of looming question of the podcast in general is, when it comes to workplace culture, is it even possible to transform? And out of this conversation, I think the necessity of a work culture guide, and we love working with clients to develop work culture guides, because then you have the idea of like, what is that culture? You get buy-in from everyone, what you want that culture to be. Therefore, it's much easier to be transparent about all of that because everyone knows we're all in this together for this thing that everyone should be inspired about and engaged about. So thank you for bringing that back up. And I'd love to give you the last word, being that you are our guest today.
Well, I love what you're doing. I thank you for inviting me to be a guest. And more than anything, I mean, I think this is important and necessary work. Obviously, Joe and I have been on the journey for a while. For him to get clarity around kind of what his purpose is and why he's showing up. And when I think about, the work environment and the collateral damage, I call it, of poor leadership, it's really a big problem and an opportunity for people to show up and actually, equip people who are leading organizations with the right tools. And so that's an affirmation of the work that you guys are doing and an enthusiasm for, again, how you're showing up. The will, this is the part of the equation. I call it, we have these higher functions that work when we're intentional about making them work. The will for change, especially as people, elevate up to higher levels, gets harder in reality relative to what people say. So you being transparent with people who have titles and positions about the realities of their will needing to change for the benefit of the health of the organization is really critical. And I think, again, as you get higher and higher up, the hubris that comes along with that, oftentimes you literally are not speaking to the people who you really need to be engaged with in relationship with. And those are the people who are coming into your organization and are the future of your organization. So this is something that I'm happy to, again, continue to talk about and help kind of nurture, which is how do you change the will of leadership to change paradigms within their organization? Lego's an example, right? To understand, I don't know the guy's name, so to understand who the CEO was or how the CEO came in and had the will. Now, oftentimes the answer was, well, he was the new guy. It's the old guy who doesn't have the will to change that becomes the problem in an organization like that. So anyways, I think that's an area and an opportunity for you guys to really attack the will of leadership, the C-level leadership, to change paradigms within an organization, to create a culture that fosters or harnesses the good and the power of what the people can bring to that organization. There you go.
Amazing. And Mark, where can our listeners find you and find your work and connect with you?
Well, I'll just give an email address. I don't publish me out there into the world. Most of what I'm doing now at this point in time is referral, relational referral type work. So I'm not really out there publicly saying, hey, hire me. But if you want to talk to me further, I have my personalized license plate, Mark J. Chassman at AOL.com. People go, I didn't know AOL still even has email. I go, yeah, they do still have it for those of us who have a reason to keep it. And I'm probably the one person who feels like I have a reason. Mark J. Chassman, CHASSMAN at AOL.com.
It used to be a work email.
Well, awesome. This has been an awesome conversation today. I thank everybody for taking the time and all the listeners out there for joining us once again for Workplace Theater Podcast. And we look forward to another conversation and another day and another challenge. Thank you all for listening, and thank you for joining us. Take care.
Until next time.
If today's discussion resonated with you, don't miss out. Hit the subscribe button now, leave a review, and rate Workplace Theater. Your support helps us improve. Do you have questions or comments? Click the link in our show notes. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning into the Workplace Theater.
We hope you've enjoyed our podcast. If you're interested in new ways to inspire your team, need help with a sticky workplace situation, or you'd like a communication and engagement strategy for an upcoming important objective, please contact us by emailing workplacetheater@gmail.com. This has been a Working Better Together experience, a division of Exponential Consulting LLC.